What if I told you that Zambia's economy has just recorded its highest growth since 1990? Yet the story you're hearing is not the full truth. President Hakainde Hichilema is celebrating a 9% surge, pointing to reforms and progress.
But behind the headline lies a dark, hidden battle.
Is this growth truly HH's achievement, or are Zambians still living under the shadow of Edgar Lungu's legacy? And here's the twist. While the media praises new policies, secret documents suggest that South Africa and foreign powers may be shaping Zambia's economy more than we realize. So the big question remains, who really deserves the credit? And what is HH not telling Zambians about this record-breaking growth? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will expose the hidden truth behind Zambia's so-called economic miracle. Zambia has just shocked the world with a 9% economic surge, the highest since 1990. But the question is, who really made this happen? President Hakainde Hichilema, HH, is claiming victory, pointing to reforms and progress. Yet many argue this is not his success at all, but rather the lasting impact of Edgar Lungu's legacy. On InspirAfrica Official, we uncover the hidden truth behind Zambia's economic miracle, the untold story the government doesn't want you to hear, and the global powers quietly shaping Zambia's future. Is HH hiding something? Was Edgar Lungu's economic foundation stronger than we were told? And how does this growth change Zambia's political struggle today? This is not just about numbers, it's about power, secrets, and the battle for Zambia's future.
The silent boom. How Zambia hit 9% overnight, Zambia juste choqued the world.
The economy has jumped to 9% growth, the highest in decades. But here's the twist. Nobody saw it coming. Was this the genius of President Hakainde Hichilema, or is someone else's shadow hiding in the numbers? Tonight, we dig into the silent boom that's left even the experts scratching their heads. For years, Zambia was called a nation in crisis. Under Edgar Lungu, debt piled up, inflation soared, and critics warned the country was on the edge of collapse. Newspapers called it a broken economy. Investors fled. People lost hope. So how did a nation written off as a failure suddenly become Africa's quiet success story? The government insists it was quick reforms, cutting corruption, fixing debt talks, and opening the doors for new investment. On paper, that sounds clear. But here's the problem. Many of the projects now fueling growth were never started under HH. They trace back years, to a time when Zambia was still sinking. Take the new mining deals. Copper production is at record highs, yet the contracts that made it possible were quietly signed years ago under Lungu's rule. Roads, bridges, and power stations now credited to HH's leadership? Many were already funded and launched long before he came to office. Could it be that the seeds of Zambia's boom were planted by the very man accused of destroying the economy? And yet, HH is no mere passenger. He took the wheel at the right moment, rebranded old deals, and pushed them harder. He won the trust of foreign lenders where Lungu failed. He reshaped Zambia's image abroad. But the uncomfortable question remains, is this HH's miracle, or Lungu's ghost still working in silence? The truth is messy, and neither side wants to admit it. Supporters of HH celebrate him as the savior. Loyalists of Lungu whisper that their man laid the foundation, but history stole the credit. And for ordinary Zambians, the real question is simple. Will this 9% growth actually change their lives, or is it just another number on a government report? One thing is clear, the silent boom is not as simple as it looks.
And the deeper we dig, the more we find hidden en shaping Zambia's future.
But here's the real mystery. What role did Lungu's controversial debt empire with China and the West play in this sudden growth? In the next episode, we uncover the deals that were meant to save Zambia, but nearly broke it instead. The debt empire, Lungu's gamble with China and the West.
Zambia's road shine.
Bridges stretch across rivers.
New power station light up the night.
But behind this progress lies a hidden empire of debt. And at the center of it all was Edgar Lungu, a man who bet Zambia's future on deals with both China and the West. The question is, was it vision or betrayal? When Lungu came to power, he promised transformation. And for a moment, it looked real. Chinese construction firms built highways at lightning speed. Billions of dollars poured in from Beijing. The West, not wanting to be left behind, offered loans and aid of their own. Zambia became the battlefield of two superpowers. But here's the twist. For every bridge that rose, a debt pile grew even higher. By 2020, Zambia became the first African nation to default during the pandemic. Newspapers called it the death of an economy. Citizens blamed Lungu. Yet, here's the paradox. The very projects funded by that debt are now the backbone of Zambia's 9% boom.
Take the Lusaka Road.
Once mocked as white elephants, they now carry trucks full of copper exports. The power plants, built with borrowed money, are keeping factories alive. Even critics admit, without these controversial loans, Zambia's growth today might have been impossible. But was Lungu a visionary who built too fast, or a reckless leader who mortgaged the nation's soul?
Détessoir the storige d'Arke.
Because while Chinese cranes filled the skyline, whispers spread about hidden contracts, inflated costs, and deals that enriched only a few insiders. Some say Zambia's debt empire wasn't about development at all, but about power.
And the West?
They weren't innocent either. Their loans came with strings, policies, reforms, and quiet pressure that shaped elections and politics. Zambia became a pawn in a bigger game, trapped between Beijing and Washington. And Lungu? He thought he could play both sides. But here's the question no one wants to answer. Was Zambia's economic collapse under Lungu actually the price of setting the stage for its silent recovery today? The story doesn't end with debt. Because the real fuel behind Zambia's rise is something much older, much deeper. The country's hidden wealth in copper, cobalt, and gold. And in the next episode, we uncover the secret mining deals that no leader wants you to see. What HH won't admit, the ghost of Lungu's projects. Everywhere you look in Zambia, you see new growth. Factories buzzing, highways stretching, power plants running. The government calls it a success story under President Hakainde Hichilema. But here's the secret no one in State House wants to say out loud. Many of these projects were born years earlier, under Edgar Lungu. Yes, the same Lungu accused of wrecking Zambia's economy. The same leader blamed for debt and default. The ghost of his projects is now fueling the boom. And that raises one burning question. Who really deserves the credit? Let's take the roads. The Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway, once slammed as too expensive, too corrupt, too ambitious. Back then, critics called it a scandal. Today, it's being celebrated as a cornerstone of Zambia's economic revival.
Truc move fasté.
Copper gets to market quicker.
And suddenly, the project d'OSNT look so foolish.
Or the power plants.
Remember the Kariba upgrade?
The hydro stations? Under Lungu, they were buried in debt and delays. Now, with the economy surging, they're powering factories and reducing blackouts. HH gets the praise for stable energy supply, but the bricks and turbines were laid long before he stepped in. And then there's agriculture. Fertilizer subsidies and farm block programs, mocked under PF as wasteful. Yet, those same farms are now contributing to the country's record harvest numbers under HH. Did the old policies fail, or were they simply ahead of their time? Here's where it gets tricky. HH has been smart. He polished, rebranded, and in some cases, restructured these projects. He gave them new life, new investors, and new hope. Without his reforms, they might have collapsed completely. But can he claim them as his own? Or is he quietly standing on the shoulders of a man history has tried to erase? Supporters of Lungu whisper that Zambia's success is his unfinished legacy. HH's camp insists it was only his reforms that made any of it possible. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and that's exactly why nobody wants to talk about it. But here's the deeper mystery. If Lungu's so-called failed projects are now lifting Zambia, what about the hidden ones? The secret mining contracts, the quiet land deals, the projects never announced to the public? Could they be the real engine behind the boom? In the next episode, we uncover the hidden gold rush, the secret mining deals that shaped Zambia's economy long before anyone noticed. A tale of two leaders, from crisis to miracle. In 2019, Zambia was gasping for air. Inflation soared, debt piled up, and salaries lost value overnight. Under Edgar Lungu, critics said the economy was bleeding to death. Foreign investors packed their bags.
The IMF slammed the doors shut.
For many Zambians, it felt like the country had fallen off a cliff. Fast forward just a few years, and headlines tell a very different story. 9% growth, rising exports, and international praise.
Zambia, 11 sick man of Africa S économie, suddenly reborn a miracle story.
But here's the catch. the credit doesn't belong to one man alone. It's the tale of two leaders, two visions, and one nation caught in the middle. Under Lungu, money flowed in, from China, from Europe, from bondholders in New York. Projects mushroomed everywhere: highways, bridges, hospitals, power plants. To the outside world, Zambia looked like a country on the rise. But inside, the cracks were already spreading. The debt was unsustainable. And when COVID struck, everything collapsed. Then came Hakainde Hichilema, the businessman turned president who promised a new beginning. He took over a nation drowning in debt, mocked as a default case. But HH played a different game. He charmed creditors. He cut flashy spending. He talked reform, transparency, and accountability. Suddenly, the same IMF that had slammed the door opened it wide for him. But here's the paradox. Many of the projects now fueling Zambia's growth were launched by Lungu. And many of the reforms saving Zambia today are HH's.
One laisse briques.
The other polished the walls. Without Lungu's massive buildup, there would be little infrastructure to drive today's exports. Without HH's diplomatic reset, those projects might have rotted in debt forever. So was Zambia rescued, or recycled? Did HH truly create a miracle, or did he inherit the tools of a man history had already condemned? This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. For HH's supporters, giving Lungu credit feels like betrayal. For Lungu's camp, admitting HH fixed the mess feels like surrender. And for ordinary Zambians, the truth doesn't matter unless the growth reaches their pockets. But the deeper question is this: how much of Zambia's boom is really built on its natural wealth, hidden beneath the ground? Copper, cobalt, gold, resources both leaders touched, but never fully revealed. In the next episode, we uncover the hidden gold rush, the mining deals no leader wants to admit, and how they may hold the real key to Zambia's future.
The hidden gold rush. Mining deals nobody talks about. Zambia's economy has always been tied to copper. For decades, it was called the Copper Belt of Africa. But what if I told you that copper is only half the story? Beneath the soil lies cobalt, gold, manganese. Resources so valuable they could change the destiny of a nation. And yet, the real deals that control them are hidden in the shadows. Under Edgar Lungu, whispers of secret contracts circulated everywhere. Mining rights handed quietly to foreign firms. Concessions sold for a fraction of their true value. In Parliament, officials denied it. On the streets, miners complained that foreigners got rich while locals remained poor. But buried inside those contracts were seeds of today's boom. Fast forward to HH's government. Suddenly, Zambia's exports are soaring. Mining companies are producing more than ever, and new players from Canada, the UK, and even China are striking deals. HH tells the world it's a new era of transparency. But here's the catch: many of the mines now driving this growth were licensed years ago under Lungu. The public only sees the ribbon-cutting ceremonies, never the signatures behind closed doors. Take cobalt, essential for electric car batteries. Global demand has exploded. Zambia now finds itself in the middle of a global scramble for supply. But who really owns those cobalt mines? Are the profits flowing back to Zambia, or quietly shipped abroad under contracts no one dares to publish? And then there's gold. In 2020, reports surfaced of illegal exports worth millions leaving the country. Smuggled, untaxed, unrecorded. Today, gold is suddenly appearing in Zambia's balance sheets, boosting growth. So did the smuggling stop? Or did the players simply change? Here's the mystery no one wants to answer. Is Zambia's boom the result of brilliant policy, or just the natural consequence of a resource rush already signed and sealed years ago? For HH, the challenge is clear. He must convince the people that this is his success, his transparency, his leadership. For Lungu's loyalists, it's proof that his failed projects were actually building blocks for a future he never got to enjoy. But there's a darker side, because every boom carries a curse. When the mines run dry, when prices fall, what happens to Zambia's miracle then? In the next episode, we dive into the IMF illusion, how foreign creditors pulled the strings, and why Zambia's sovereignty may be at risk even in its moment of triumph.
The IMF illusion. Who really pulled the strings? A 350 to 450 word YouTube script, keeping the Netflix-style suspense and cliffhanger ending. YouTube's script: when Zambia hit rock bottom in 2020, the world turned its back. Creditors refused to lend. Investors pulled out. The economy was branded the first pandemic casualty in Africa. But behind the headlines, another drama was unfolding, a silent battle between Zambia and the International Monetary Fund. For years, Edgar Lungu begged the IMF for a bailout. He flew delegates to Washington, sent ministers to negotiate, and promised reforms. But the IMF said no. They claimed Zambia lacked transparency, that debt numbers didn't add up, that hidden Chinese loans made it impossible to trust Lusaka's books. Lungu walked away empty-handed, his government sinking deeper into default. Then, just 1 year later, HH came to power. Suddenly, the IMF door swung wide open. Within months, Zambia secured a $1.3 billion package. Praise poured in. Western leaders hailed HH as a reformer. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The IMF didn't change its standards overnight. What changed was politics. Critics whisper that HH was given support not because Zambia's numbers improved, but because the West saw him as their man. A businessman, a reformist, a leader who could tilt Zambia away from China's orbit. In exchange for loans, Zambia had to freeze hiring, cut subsidies, and raise taxes, policies that hit ordinary citizens hard. So was this really an economic rescue, or a political bargain disguised as reform? Some analysts argue the IMF needed a success story in Africa, and Zambia became the poster child. Others claim HH's government inherited the groundwork from Lungu, the data, the debt talks, the foundation, but rebranded it under a friendlier face. Meanwhile, China, Zambia's largest creditor, quietly kept its influence. Behind the scenes, Beijing renegotiated loans and pushed its own conditions. Zambia found itself trapped in a tug-of-war between East and West, both pulling strings while the nation danced in the middle. And here's the big question. Did Zambia really escape its debt crisis, or has it only traded one master for another? For HH, the IMF deal is proof of leadership. For Lungu's defenders, it's proof that he laid the foundation but never got the credit. For ordinary Zambians, the IMF illusion is harder to see, because food prices remain high, jobs remain scarce, and the miracle hasn't yet reached their pockets. But the story doesn't end here. Because when leaders play with both debt and aid, politics always follows. And in the next episode, we explore how Lungu's shadow still lingers over HH's success, a battle of legacy versus leadership. Legacy or liability? Lungu's shadow over HH's success. YouTube script: Zambia is booming. 9% growth, glowing reviews from the IMF, and international investors lining up. President Hakainde Hichilema is praised as the man who saved a sinking ship. But there's one shadow he cannot escape: Edgar Lungu. Was Zambia's success built by HH's reforms? Or is it Lungu's ghost that still haunts the numbers? Lungu's years in power left scars: massive debt, accusations of corruption, and a battered economy. For many, he was the villain who nearly destroyed Zambia. Yet the very infrastructure he built with borrowed billions, the highways, power plants, and mining contracts, now form the backbone of Zambia's miracle. HH may polish the story, but the foundations were poured long before him. This is where the legacy question gets messy. If Zambia thrives, does that mean Lungu deserves credit? Or is he simply a liability, a name tied to debt and scandal, whose presence undermines the government's success story? HH's supporters insist the new growth is his victory: reforms, diplomacy, and trust building with investors. But Lungu's defenders whisper, he laid the bricks, HH just painted the walls. And ordinary Zambians? Many still remember the pain of rising prices, fuel shortages, and empty promises during Lungu's years. For them, giving him credit feels like betrayal. Yet they also see the truth: those roads, those power stations, those farms didn't appear from thin air. So what happens when history refuses to choose? HH cannot erase Lungu's fingerprints, and Lungu cannot claim a legacy without admitting his failures. Their rivalry now stretches beyond politics. It's a fight over who writes Zambia's economic story. But here's the real danger: the longer Zambia debates legacy versus leadership, the more it risks ignoring the present. Because while the two men's shadows battle, the cracks in Zambia's boom are already showing. Inflation remains high, rural poverty is untouched, and the benefits of 9% growth haven't reached every home. So is Lungu's legacy a foundation for progress, or a curse that Zambia is still paying for? And will HH's success survive once the shadow of his rival finally fades? The answer may lie in betrayal, not from outsiders, but from within. Because in the next episode, we reveal the ministers who secretly switched sides, carrying Lungu's unfinished agenda into HH's new government.